Hello, and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Well, I'm down here in this beautiful city of George today. You can see it's overcast, but there are the mountains behind me. What a beautiful place in our country. I'm in a season at the moment of traveling from city to city, preaching at various conferences, and this particular conference is about the harvest. Helping the churches in this region to present the gospel, to present the love of Jesus into the community. And this has been God's heart over the centuries, to send his prophets, and we, his church, are the prophets today, aren't we? Holding out his plans, his word to various cities. Now, if you look at some of our cities and countries in the world today, you might say to them, well, they don't deserve it. I mean, look at Russia, what they're doing today. Look at North Korea, the way they oppress Christians and all people today. In fact, look over our border. Look at Zimbabwe. Look at what that government is doing. And many of the prophets were quite grumpy about the cities that they lived in, and were sort of anticipating God's judgment on them and anticipating God, ending these civilizations. And so, which is actually what happens. God doesn't allow the proud to live forever and to reign forever. I mean, this Ninevite community that Nahum was preaching into was absolutely horrific. There are museums today with monuments in them to the violent atrocities of these Ninevite leaders. Listen to some of the things that you will find in museums today. I cut off their heads and formed them into pillars, a Syrian leader boasted. Bubo, son of Bubo, I flayed on the city of Arabella and spread his skin on the city wall. Imagine somebody doing that to another human being. I cut off the limbs of the officers in the royal who had rebelled against me. Their corpses I formed into pillars. Another one says, I made one pillar of the living and another of the heads. I bound their heads into posts around the city. Now, you can hardly forgive someone like Nahum and Jonah for saying, we don't want to see these guys off the hook. We don't want God's grace to them. And so what we see in these books is God's judgment. Sure, we see his judgment, and then we see God's hope for mankind. So let's start with God's judgment here in Nahum chapter 2. An attacker advances against you, Nineveh. Guard your fortresses. Brace yourselves. He's basically saying God's coming. He's sending his judgment. And so the downfall of Nineveh is described in 4 vantage points in this particular chapter, looking ahead toward the opposition. And it basically says in verse 6, the river gates are thrown open and the palace collapses. The enemy is coming. And then a siege and the battle, that's from verse 14 through to 17. Then the actual battle from verse 2 through 4. The chariots storm through the streets, rushing back and forth through the squares. They look like flaming torches. They dart about like lightning, describing what it's like when the Babylonians invaded and just tore them to shreds. Many people have looked at these verses and said, the prophets spoke about impending judgment, but they also look to the day. It's been a theme through all of the minor prophets, hasn't it? The day. And this picture here, I looked at the city squares, and these chariots looked like flaming torches darting about like lightning. And people are saying, that's the prophet looking into the future and seeing modern cities and cars rushing around and saying, there will come a time where even these great cities are going to come to an end. And it could be. And then Nahum chapter 3 pretty much ends by saying, King of Syria, nothing can heal you. Your wound is fatal. And all who hear the news about you clap their hands at your fall. For who has not felt your endless cruelty? Now, obviously, because of Nineveh's renown in its barbaric cruelty, no wonder Nahum sees the nations applauding at their demise. But, you might say, well, that's a hectic little book. God warning a city that he's going to take it out. But as we've seen in the other prophets, all these warnings carry with it, repent, turn to me, stave off our judgment. And so as we move on to the next prophet tomorrow,